Hey everyone. Thanks for joining another session in the Field Service Bootcamp. That's part of the 365 Saturday organization. I am Dave Clark. I work at Microsoft and I lead readiness for field service and related solutions like remote assist. And I spend most of my time helping people become experts in the field service solution. And when it comes to the MVPs who are already experts, I like to continue to help them remain experts as the solution grows and evolves. So I am joined by members of the MVP community, Sean, Mark, and Antti. And I believe later we might even be joined by our friend Ben Vomer, who is the worldwide sales leader for field service. So can I just do a quick mic check? Mark, are you here?
Yep, I'm here.
Awesome. Antti?
Yes, sir.
And Sean?
I am here.
Perfect. So today's session is a keynote with Kyle Young, who is the Principal Program Manager for Field Service. Kyle is going to take us through the state of the field service product in the industry. He's going to talk about some new features that have been released. And he's going to talk about future investment areas for the product and beyond. And then finally, we're going to finish with some question and answer from the MVP panel. So Kyle, before we get into it, would you mind introducing yourself, telling us about your role at Microsoft and what that means?
Sure. Thanks, David, and thanks to the MVPs and everybody participating and those that have really put this together. We're really grateful for all those efforts. So I'm Kyle Young. I'm the product leader for field service and resource scheduling. So I have the opportunity of helping with the rest of my team and the engineers to help drive the product, try to understand the needs and the requirements out there, try to be responsive and listen to what we're hearing from customers and from MVPs and others, and then make the right decisions and make the right investments in the product.
Excellent. Yeah, so if you don't mind, if we can go ahead and get started. And my first question that I wanted to ask you was, if we took the 10,000-foot view of field service, how do you see the current state of our field service product, and how do you see it relating to, let's say, the greater industry?
Yeah, so it's a great question, David. Thanks. I've got some material I'll share. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the state of field service. So the big news that we've been excited about for the last couple of months is the recent Gartner Magic Quadrant, in which Microsoft is now placed as a leader in Magic Quadrant. And that represents not only what we've done with the product, but also customer success. And so Gartner looks heavily at customer success as well. And so that's a tribute to all of you watching and listening as well, because you're part of that success in terms of helping our customers to succeed and having customers that are willing to stand up and say, yes, here's how I feel about the Microsoft solution. So you can see that it puts us into a pretty short list of other providers out there in the market with which we go head to head, but it also is a great recognition by Gartner of the great progress that we've made in the product in just these few short years. So if we move on beyond Gartner, there are some other indicators. And so if you talk to Ben and his team, you'll hear about how strong we're seeing sales and the ever-growing pipeline. Of course, many of you see that pipeline and are contributors to that as you help to land new customers and help with the rollout of existing customers. We're also seeing that in usage. We measure usage very closely, and we look particularly at monthly active users, and we're seeing significant growth in monthly active users. It's been interesting the last few months. We hit kind of a high point in early March. We were quite excited about that, and then as the effects of COVID hit, we saw a significant drop-off as many of our customers ended up losing the opportunity of serving their customers. But that has now rebounded. And is actually higher than and significantly higher than we were in March, actually. And so we're seeing that significant growth. We're seeing customers who've rebounded. We're seeing new customers who have added implementations. And we're seeing customers who are already implemented but are continuing further rollout. So all of that is really quite positive. The other thing I wanted to call attention to is, of course, we call it Run 1, but it's the whole point of getting all of our customers onto the single latest version, and then through auto update, keeping them on that version. And so part of this is a thank you for those who have helped us to get to this point, but also just a request if you have customers who are still in that category of needing to get current, and also customers who need to get updated and transition to UCI, if you'll please pay particular attention to those customers. Our target is to get this completed by the end of calendar year. We've actually gone to a motion where we're scheduling orgs to be updated, but it'd be much better if customers are proactively ahead of that, getting themselves updated and current. And then from that point, we'll be in a much better position to service our customers. They'll have the latest and greatest updates and so forth. And so just a quick call out on Run 1. And then the other thing that's really exciting is really the customer success stories. Now, many of you have a part of these and have many of your own success stories, but I went to customers.microsoft.com last week, and I just pulled some of the more recent case studies that have been published, and I just put a few headers here, and you can see that they're in different parts of the world and different industries. And it's really exciting to see customers who are succeeding with the solution out there and particularly want to tell about the success they're having. And so really, that's really the best measure of momentum is customers that are succeeding with the solution. So that's just a little bit on overall momentum. Now, here's a slide that I've been maintaining for the last little while, and I just updated it recently, and I'm certainly not going to drain this slide, but it just is a visual example of the set of features that we've had the opportunity of adding to the product in the last couple of years. Now, many of you will notice that these features resonate with feedback you've been giving and ideas that you've entered, and features that you have pushed us to ship, as well as features in which you participated and provided feedback and provided input. And so just a quick reminder here of the opportunity that we've had to have a significant level of investment and be able to drive this, this rich, increasingly rich set of features in the product. So that brings us to Wave 2. Of course, many of you are, have seen early access, and if you haven't, it landed last week, and so it's time to go ahead and update your orgs and take advantage of the features that we're seeing here in Wave 2. So let's jump in. So this slide covers, is a highlight slide covering some of the areas of functionality that we're releasing in Wave 2. And I'm going to drill down into each area, but just this is just a reminder of how we think about our investments in terms of proactive service delivery, resource scheduling, technician success, and then increasingly functionality under the insights and AI category. So let me just do a quick drill into each of these areas. So the first area on proactive service delivery. The first areas of investments that we've made around Wave 2, or maybe the most prominent investments we've made, are around assets and being able to service assets. And so one of the needs that our customers have is not everything just fits nicely into a street address. And so being able to have a functional location for assets and have those be a nested location with a hierarchy, and also enriching the asset hierarchy itself is a key investment that we expect will pay back big benefits to our customers. Similarly, we've added the ability to have extensible set of properties for assets. Now, this can be useful in and of itself, but it's also going to be useful for future features as we look to do things like usage or event-based servicing of assets. We continually focus on user experience, and one of the things that we focus heavily on is our satisfaction of our customers, and so we watch those measured very carefully. And we see feedback that the work order experience, as well as a bunch of the other more complicated forms, need to be much simpler, and that experience needs to flow better. And so we're actually now have these subgrids, or these related entities, available as dialogues. And so if you want to pop into the products or into services or service tasks, you pop in, you take a look, you close it, and then you're right back where you started. And so we think this will pay back great benefits. And so we're enabling that across the field service solution in this release. Next up is resource scheduling. One of the big opportunities for resource scheduling is to have a deeper and a broader use of the optimization functionality. We've made significant investment there, and we have a bunch of rich functionality. And so one of the things that we're focused on in this release, and you'll see the first versions of this, and this will come with the new next generation schedule board, which is going to be GA, is to have optimization just simply embedded in that experience. So it's less of a separate experience, less of a separate decision point, but it just making that just embedded in the experience is part of what we're focusing on in Wave 2. Another thing that's important to our customers is the realization that things are different at different times of the day, that there are different traffic patterns, and that will actually affect how long it takes technicians to arrive. And so bringing that into the scheduling system and recognizing that, and then actually predicting how long it's going to take based on time of day is a key feature enhancement. And then another one that we've received a lot of customer feedback on is the fact that you may want the option of scheduling travel outside of working hours, because sometimes technicians actually should be scheduled to arrive at the job at the beginning of their workday versus starting travel at the beginning of the workday, and same thing at the end of the workday. And so we now have that option available in the optimization functionality. And the last category on the top row here is technician success. And of course, that's been a significant and important investment area for us. As many of you know, we've been focusing heavily on the new mobile application built on Power App. And that released in GA in May, and we've actually done rapid iteration on that. The app keeps improving. You can see improvements that are in the app that came out with early access. And we're continuing to invest in those features, and through Wave 2, we will reach parity with our existing field service mobile app. So key features, keep watching, and the app will continue to improve and become more rich. And just a quick plug here is that now it's time to start looking at opportunities, especially for new customers who are implementing, who could actually work with the existing functionality of the app. And so if you have those opportunities, please reach out to us. We're very interested in helping customers, early customer success on the new application. Not only are we adding features, but we're really focused on making sure that the new app has just this great experience. And so one of the experiences you can see here, for example, is using an Outlook-inspired capability or look and feel for the being able to view your bookings and work with your daily calendar, and doing simple things like state changes and status changes on the booking and so forth. And so we're going to continue to make improvements in the app as well. We're very excited now that we're releasing GA, the new inspections functionality. We put this in preview in Wave 1. We've now done significant investments, adding things like branching and conditional logic and versioning and exporting as PDF and so forth. And now we're pushing this out as GA, and we're very excited about this. It's been a long time need. Many of our customers are very anxious to have this capability. And then on the bottom category, on the category on the bottom, is around insights and AI. And so how do we embed more ability to understand what's happening and to take action and have the system be smarter and more helpful as part of just using the solution. And so we've added, leveraging the customer voice functionality, we've added the capability of just very easily sending out completion surveys after jobs are done, so that customers can get that feedback loop from their customers in a very simple way, leveraging the new customer voice functionality. We've also found that there are some pieces missing in terms of being able to fully understand jobs that have been done. And so we've added some additional metrics on arrival and completion and duration, so that information can be fed back in, and it's a feedback loop to understand how things are actually working with work orders, and we can have more visibility and more insights there. I just included this slide. David has sent this out, but he's done a fantastic job of pulling together all the material around Wave 2, so that you can very quickly go to and index and see what's happening with Wave 2.
Perfect. Thanks, Kyle. I appreciate that. I know you just spoke about things that have just been released, but I got to say that every time I work with the MVPs in the greater partner community, they're always laser focused on the roadmap and what's coming next.
Yeah.
And I do understand that, before things are publicly released, you can't commit to anything in writing. But I'm wondering if you could share with us, what lens do you view things, when you're thinking about what to invest in, what to build next, and how to work with your program managers and your engineers. So I'm wondering if you could shed a little light on that.
Yeah, for sure, David. It's a good question. Yeah, so let me go to this diagram, and we use this diagram across our customer care team, so across customer service and field service. And for us, this helps to represent the kind of the key scenarios or investment areas on which we focus. So of course, on the left-hand side, you see those, and we think about it as a continuum of service. And so our customers, don't, just because we have a product called, customer service, a product called field service, our customers actually think about this broad spectrum of service. And so we try to think about it in that way as we think about our investments. But that said, we of course are focusing over on the right side on the field service functionality. And so we look at, we're looking at these areas of how do we continue to drive more, capabilities for proactive service, for our customers to be ahead and to be, more proactive for them. And so these, and then, resource scheduling, of course, is a continually important area, matching the right resources, the right place, the right time. And then, of course, none of this matters if we send technicians out if they're not successful. And so that, that's a key area of investment. And then, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, insights and knowledge is also very important to us. And so you asked a little bit about the process of how. We have signals that come from a variety of areas. So we have signals that come from the market and looking at where the market is headed, and particularly drilling into what analysts are saying, and analysts help to reflect, what the broader customer set is saying and where, where things are going. And so we look at that broader market and looking at things like getting customers who are wanting to drive more profitable in their operations as they move to profit-centered, or even moving beyond profit-centered to outcome-based. And so instead of the traditional model of selling and perhaps after market service, we're into that. We're seeing more and more of that model of anything as a service. And so we're trying to be reflective of that and make sure that the product is able to support that. Other forms of signal, of course, are our customers. And so we get signal back from customers who are using the existing product and looking at ways that we can just improve what they're currently using. And that's like the example of the work order dialogue I showed earlier. That's an example of trying to just make the product more usable. So we make a fair amount of investment there. And then also the signal from customers and partners about things that they could enable, or certain scenarios that they can enable as we make investments in the product. And so, for example, you can see in this release, we're making some, in wave 2, we made investment in assets. And we're going to continue to do that because one of the things we're hearing is that customers need a capability that's, part of customer engagement, but is helping them to understand and track their assets, and so they can do a better job of asset servicing. And so we see that as an area that we'll continue to invest in. And frankly, we think it's a differentiating area. We think that as Microsoft, we can bring together, no pun intended, the set of assets that are going to make that really a differentiating experience. And so we think that's important to continue that. On resource scheduling, we're releasing the new schedule board as GA in wave 2. We have more work to do on that so that it's a complete superset of the existing schedule board. And so we will continue to work on that in the future, as well as continuing to make optimization more consumable and usable, and also, enhancing that with features that our customers need, like we did predictive travel, which is a big deal. It's an important capability that we've added in wave 2. We'll continue to make, investments on that front. On technician success, we will of course continue to invest in the new mobile application. We know we'll have over the next couple of years a migration of customers, but we want to make sure they have the functionality that they need, especially those who are using the current app. We have to make sure that that they have a solid way to migrate the things that they're doing today. But beyond that, we see that building on the Power App platform and the rest of the Power platform, gives us a great opportunity to be differentiating in the market. And so we're going to continue to invest in that app. We have this great foundation, and we have a lot of things that we are looking that we can do based on now being on that platform to make that a very differentiated part of our offering and just make that really a first-class experience in the industry for our technicians. We'll continue investments with our fellow team around mixed reality and doing more with mixed reality for extending remote assist and so forth for our technicians and those end users. And then we will continue on some of the investments we've made around AI-based suggestions. And so in wave one, we previewed IoT alert and incident type suggestions, and we're providing suggestions around predicted durations as part of wave two. And we will continue to take those features which you preview, advance those features, and then continue to infuse intelligence in the product. So anyway, that's a rough, maybe a long answer to the question, but that's roughly how we think about the roadmap and some of the things that we will be focusing on beyond wave two.
Interesting. Excellent. Well, looks like at this point we could start moving over to the Q&A portion of this, and I want to open it up to the MVPs here on the phone. But I could start off and get the conversation going with a few questions I had of my own.
Sure.
In the beginning of the call, you did mention the COVID pandemic, and you mentioned that you did see a drop-off, I believe, in March or April, and you actually said that it rebounded. So I'm wondering when that was happening and you saw usage going down, and I think it's very clear why it would go down. People are staying home. People weren't going into businesses. I'm curious, what were you thinking about during that time? And I also am curious about your opinion about how and why did usage go back up? In my head, I'm thinking, well, a lot of restaurants are still closed, so maybe people aren't going out and servicing restaurants. But on the other hand, there may be on-site service scenarios where people are going to hospitals and fixing there. So do you have any thoughts about what you were thinking when usage was dropping off? And can you even begin to explain about why it's actually gone back up and even reached higher heights?
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so it was very interesting. I mean, it was a little bit of a jump into the unknown because this is a bit unprecedented. So as we started, as we were heading into that COVID period, we started looking a little more closely at what was happening with specific customers. And one thing that we noticed, we saw customers that were just really dropping right off, like customers who particularly were in B2C and retail type scenarios and so forth. That dropped off very quickly. And so, we were very, very concerned for some of our customers who were in that boat. But we also had noticed some counter trends. We noticed some customers who were in like home health care and safety and health inspections and other things who actually saw some usage spike up during that time. And so it was an interesting thing to watch. And so as we drill down, into those customers, we saw that, some customers obviously were going to be affected by that negatively. And so they're going to be largely a function of just, when the restrictions were going to be changing and starting to open up. But one thing that we did find with some of our customers too was that it ended up representing a time of pent-up demand. And so there were still things that needed to be done as soon as they were able to do it. So they ended up having, kind of building some backlog there. Another thing that we heard from some of our customers and implementations was they saw this as a good opportunity to make progress on the implementations that they were working on so that they would come out of COVID even stronger and better. And so we saw some of that motion. And then I think a part of it is just other customers who had rollouts that were on plan, but they ended up having to pause those. And again, it probably created a little bit of a pent-up situation because they had rollout plans that they had to either compress or to move out. But as restrictions started to ease around the world, then we saw them being able to amp up and start their rollout plans. So I guess a multiple, set of factors there. I mean, I guess, the good news is that for the most part, we see most of our customers in especially the ones that had that significant drop off, as we have seen them in a rebound situation. So, that is definitely good news for those customers.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective that you were saying that it was a time where they could think about their field service operations and try and come out of the pandemic stronger than before. And it does remind me that I was just listening to a presentation by Brian Chesky, who is the CEO of Airbnb. And he was saying that as bad as the pandemic is, it was giving him and his organization the opportunity to basically do all the things they always wanted to do, but never had the time because they were so focused on delivering for customers and so forth.
Yeah, see, there you go. Yeah, and the other interesting effect, of course, with our sister product, Remote Assist, Remote Assist really came into its own because that was, uniquely solving some of those problems of not being able to have, people on site as they were before, and actually leveraging that functionality. So Remote Assist was definitely the right answer for the time, and so that helped to really show the value of that great product.
Right. Yeah. So I'd like to understand the perspective from the MVPs and see if the MVPs have any questions. And I was thinking, Sean, I wonder if it was possible if we could start with you. Is there, from your view of working with customers from your partner organization, I was wondering if there's anything you wanted to know about, either the field service product or the industry or really anything.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, we have a lot of excitement from our customers about inspections per se. Quite a few actually looking to really get in there and understand how they can implement that to enable that process. But we've also had a lot of interest in that inspections offering outside of field service. So has there been any thought to that, and how might customers really be able to enable that in and out of field service?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things as we built it, now we knew that this was a highly requested customer feature. And so we have customers that have a whole range of inspection scenarios. And so it was really important to make sure that we added that into our field service offering. But as we developed that, and even if you look at it today, even though there are some tie-ins to field service, like we tie it into incident type and service task, we have designed inspection so that it actually could be used in the future independent of field service. And in fact, the tie-ins are not all that significant, but it's one thing that we're looking at in the future is just making that more easily available from a standalone perspective. Because we do understand that functionality could be useful in a lot of different contexts.
That's awesome. Thanks.
You bet.
Yeah, and if we open it up to you as well, Antti and Mark, I'm wondering, either inspections or otherwise, what functionality are you seeing that your customers are asking for? And I'm wondering if you had any additional questions as well.
Yeah, so I've got a couple. The partner that I work for, we're kind of full stack. So we'll do HR, we'll do Dynamics, we'll do FinOps. One of the, obviously being able to tie it all in now is a kind of huge story, being able to tell from onboarding in HR, getting people's skills, moving them over to then billing. But enterprise asset management is kind of a big topic that we get asked a lot of questions about. Obviously, tying the two together could be quite huge. Is that something that's in the pipeline?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And so just for context, and we see, and if you look at analysts like Gartner and so forth, there really are two distinct kind of areas of functionality. So enterprise asset management is for organizations managing their assets inside, like a manufacturer who's managing the things they use to produce things, those big, monstrous machines and things inside of a plant. That's what EAM is all about. And so there are some things that are similar. But then field service is really all about when you've got end customer commitments, and you've got assets that you need to go service all, who knows where. Typically they're owned by the customer, or they're, you service, regardless of the ownership, you service those assets, and, matching the right tech in the right location at the right time, sending them out, having online, offline, all of those are key functionality. But there are a lot of good scenarios where having EAM and field service work together, I think, as you're pointing out, Mark, is to the advantage. And so that's one of the things that we've done. We're working very closely. We work really closely with the asset management team in the supply chain management team in F&O. And so initially, one of the things that we started doing now is we actually, within DataFlex Pro, otherwise known as Common Data Service, we have a single representation of asset. And we actually, in wave one, we published that initial asset integration so that we are working around that same asset. And so you can have something that's modeled in asset management that is actually gets serviced in field service. And so you actually have a view from either asset management or field service around that same asset, and you can actually see service history and some of the other attributes and so forth. And so that was basically the first step that we've taken with that. And so we'd love to hear feedback as well, like what are other areas that we should focus on. But our goal with asset management and field service is to make sure that those stay really well aligned. And that alignment will continue to be around DataFlex Pro, around CDS, to make sure that we have that common representation of assets and the information around it.
Perfect. That's a good way to go.
Yeah, Antti, I wanted to give you opportunity. Did you have any additional thoughts? For context, Antti, I do know that one of your main specialties among many of your specialties is project service automation, but I'm wondering if you had any questions or thoughts on field service.
Yeah, definitely. Would have quite many, but I'll kind of pick the one that's on top of my head as we're looking at the platform as a whole. The question is actually pretty broad, but I guess what I'm asking is sort of like a vision that Microsoft has on platform unification. So it sort of touches what Mark asked about enterprise asset management. But what's the thought on Microsoft on unifying the platform as a whole? Bringing all those ERPs and core customer engagement apps together, and what's the role of field service in all of this?
Right, it's a good question. I'm a little out of my element talking about the entire platform unification, so I would probably defer that to others. But I think that the point behind the question, particularly around field service, is okay, what should that look like, and really how are we coming together between F&O, supply chain management, and field service? So, which is a great question. So at this point in time, the way in which we come together with our functionality on the F&O side is through DataFlex Pro or Common Data Service. And so there's now a dual write functionality that has been driven from the F&O side, but basically says, okay, I can now actually do that integration, that sharing across DataFlex Pro. And I can represent that in the data model, and then as we do transactional things on each side, then you're able to take advantage of that data that lives in DataFlex Pro from each side. And so some of the areas that we've been working on with the F&O team. So for example, in Wave 2, we have focused around procurement. So field service plus procurement. And so it's a very natural scenario, as in the course of offering field service, that you consume parts and supplies and so forth. And you need to be able to drive demand in the procurement system so that you can actually replenish and order and keep your technicians supplied. And so that's one of the things that we focused on for Wave 2, leveraging the dual write and the additional integration functionality, so that as we create demand in field service, we push that over to F&O, and then somebody on that side would then say, okay, I need to order this set of parts. They would actually do that on the F&O side, receive that back, and then it would come back and be updated on the field service side when those things are received. So at this point in time, we'll leverage those capabilities like the existing integration and dual write, knowing that over time there are investments being made, to bring those the platform closer and closer together.
Perfect. That sounds really good.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing I really do love about the MVP community is that they're willing to take the solutions and they're willing to build their own IP on top of the solutions. One thing that just comes to mind because we have Andy on the call is he created a flow that will sync field service bookings to the Outlook calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as an MVP, they're very interested in how do they fill gaps and what types of IP that they can build. And if I think back to one of the slides you showed earlier, you were thinking about a few different areas. You were thinking about proactive service delivery. You were thinking about scheduling, technician success, and insights. And in my head, if I'm looking at that through the lens of the MVPs, I'm thinking, well, scheduling is very a lot of this is built on resource scheduling optimization. And as an MVP, I don't necessarily think that that's a great opportunity for me to build IP on top of RSO because I see that as like an algorithm that's owned and operated by Microsoft.
Right.
And when I look at the insights functionality, I see a lot of that being done by the data team and the insights team. And I'm not sure as an MVP that I would particularly look at that as a place to build IP. Now, if I look at the other two scenarios, when I think of technician success, now that we have the mobile app built on Power Platform and I have proactive service delivery,
Yeah.
I would see as an MVP, I would think those are the two areas where I should be looking to build IP. And I guess I want to ask you, one, am I thinking about that correctly? And two, would you think of those as areas where MVP should start to be looking to build on top of?
Right. No, that's a great point. A couple of observations here. I mean, so one of the areas that we know that MVPs currently do and will continue to add value is in making sure that the field service solution meets particular scenarios, whether it be industries or verticals or so forth. Right. So we think pretty horizontally. So just kind of in a general observation, and of course we have a new team that's focused on that, and many of our ISVs have already been working in that space, thinking about that, but doing things that will help to make it work with a given industry. And so we have MVPs that focus on manufacturing, for example, or service organizations like HVAC, and understanding what their needs are and making sure that you kind of go that last mile piece so that field service is really tuned and meets their processes. So I guess in general that's one area. But you make a good point. So if we kind of just do area by area. So I definitely think in the proactive service delivery area, particularly with the work that we're doing around asset and so forth, I would suspect there's a lot of ways in which extending asset and using it in unique ways as we build out this functionality, I think there will be great opportunity there. So for example, now that we have the functional location and the asset properties and so forth, you could see a lot of ways in which that could be positioned more vertically or more for specific scenarios. So I think your observation is good there. On the scheduling area, though, there are areas where it's not as extensible, like adding objectives and other things at this point are not extensible. But in terms of positioning scheduling for specific scenarios, like one of the things that ended up happening during COVID was that we had organizations out there like state governments and other areas that needed a scheduling system to go schedule various types of COVID testing, whether it be the initial testing or antibody testing and so forth. And so one of the things that came up very quickly was leveraging the scheduling functionality to go do that, scheduling. And so our Microsoft Services did one of the first ones of those with the state of New York. And then they realized that, hey, that's an interesting model by just the way that we've configured that and so forth. That can be used by other areas. And so even in the scheduling area, we saw the fact that if I tailor it to a specific scenario, I could find, there's value add there from a partner perspective that I could go reuse, in other scenarios. And clearly, I wouldn't argue at all with the point that, and we've seen this already, right? Incident success is a significant area of extensibility because that's where the rubber really meets the road, and having those technicians with the absolute right tools that they need to do their job is really key. And so we've seen in the past, customers adding all kinds of value there. Things like being able to have a view of the parts logistics that are in some third-party ERP system, and giving the technicians the ability to see that. Different things like I've seen one which is providing a ready-to-work check with the technician and making sure they've got all their safety equipment. Just different things that we probably aren't going to add into the product, but would be really very specific to to certain scenarios or industries or verticals, or it goes with the rest of the IP that that a partner has put together. So I agree that there's value across all of those areas. And then on the insights and AI piece, that's one of the things that we're looking at going forward as well, is to what are the right extensibility points there. So if you want to tweak, given models that are being used for suggestions, or to leverage information that's coming out of those insights, how do you take advantage of those? Like firing Power Automate based on results that come from from an AI suggestion. So we're looking at that as well. But anyway, I think you have I think your perspective was good, David, in terms of like where some of the target-rich areas are that could be extended and add value.
Okay.
Could I maybe add on a question on top of that then?
Yeah.
So a lot of the field service deployments I do are maybe not typical field service ones.
Mm-hmm.
Does Microsoft still see a repair person in a van servicing equipment as the core of field service? To give you an example, latest one I've worked on has actually been for a funeral director collecting bodies, using field service for that. It's a little bit unique. It still uses the functionality and services of field service, but it's not the traditional man in a van. Is that still Microsoft's bread and butter is for it?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. That was one of the things that was most surprising to me as I got into the field service space, was actually the breadth of scenarios. So yeah, there is the canonical scenario of the technician in the van, but we want to be careful not to overly constrain our thinking that way, because like the funeral home one or home health. So you have a medical care provider who is in a vehicle that has a bunch of medical supplies and visits a patient, so we don't call those, we don't call the patient's assets per se, but you actually have information about the patient. And that's a good example. And we have interesting examples that stem from retail, or that stem from facilities management, which can have its own nuances as well. So we try not to be overly constrained, and so that's a good area to keep us honest on that. So as MVPs, as you see these different scenarios out there, and you think that we have if you see us tunneling in on just kind of one mental model of what field service looks like, keep us honest on that, give us feedback on that, and help us to understand areas where we should invest to make sure that we're meeting those broader scenarios.
All right, perfect.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time, Kyle. Are there any last thoughts we have, either a question from the MVPs or any last thoughts, Kyle, that you want to share before we wrap up here?
All right. Well, if there's no questions, first of all, I really appreciate all the efforts on this session, and so thanks to my cohorts in the session. I really appreciate that. I guess the other thing is just again ending where we started with just a huge thank you. This community is the community that on which field service will succeed or fail. So I appreciate and thanks for myself and my team and the broader team, all the efforts, the focus and passion you have around helping customers succeed. We share that passion, and thanks just for making all of that happen. And looking forward to hearing more of the success stories and the big wins and the go lives and all those exciting things happening over the next year. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Kyle, and thanks a lot to the MVPs for organizing this event and joining this keynote. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Dave.
All righty. See you guys.